Scream 3 is widely regarded as the worst in the Scream series, and I gotta say, if that's truly the case, then I'm of the opinion that there really isn't a bad Scream film at all. Scream 3 marks the first, and as of right now, until the known to be in development Scream 5 releases next year, only Scream title not penned by series creator Kevin Williamson, due to him being tied to other commitments after absolutely blowing up in demand following the spectacular release of the first movie. Kevin had originally put a 5-page outline for 2 sequels into his original script in the hopes of selling studios on that sexy franchise potential. However, for whatever reason, while they'd been the basis for the second entry, the vast majority of those notes were thrown out for Scream 3, which was instead written by Ehren Kruger, who has a pretty damn weird resume, to be honest. Before Scream, he wrote a TV movie and a couple of decent thrillers, and then after, he went on to do the American remake of both The Ring and Ghost in the Shell, as well as Transformers 2, 3 and 4, the live-action Dumbo, and the upcoming Top Gun sequel. I don't know why this surprises me. They're all big IPs, and it makes sense that you jump someone with a track record of being able to handle profitable blockbusters between these kind of assignments. It's just very odd to me to look at The Ring and be like, oh yeah, he'd be great for Transformers 2 Revenge of the Fallen. That's not really relevant to his work on Scream 3, of course. I just find it interesting. As an additional point on the writing front, Kruger admits that although he never went credited as a writer, director Wes Craven also made huge contributions to the script in order to keep Williamson's established tone for the characters on the occasions where Kruger would veer a little off track. Side note, I absolutely love that Craven wrote a script for Scream with someone called Kruger. You know, like his creation, Freddy Krueger. I know the spelling of the surname is a little different, but that's still a fun little coincidence, right? Well, whatever, I think it's interesting. Going back to why we're here though, Kruger's plot once again follows recurring protagonist and top tier final girl, Sidney Prescott, who now at 22 years old has chosen to live a life in seclusion, working as a crisis counsellor for an abused women's hotline, but is forced to come back out of her seclusion when another killer finds her location and at any point in time threatens to strike. Originally intended to be the concluding chapter in the franchise, watching the film, it is obvious why this is considered the worst in the series. I don't think it's bad by any means, but its mystery isn't as compelling as Scream 1 and 2's, its revelations don't land as satisfyingly, the methods the killer uses require a great deal more suspension of disbelief, and overall, it's never as tense, scary, or violent as former entries. Though that latter divisive new choice of tone is by design. Releasing a whole 3 years after the prior film, a way bigger gap than the 1 year turnover between Scream 1 and 2, 3 unfortunately had to tackle with releasing in a very different America to the one the first 2 films released in. To be specific, Scream 3 was the very first massive mainstream slasher franchise title to be launched in the aftermath of the tragedies of the 1999 Columbine Massacre, an event that occurred only 2 months prior to the film's principal photography, causing the franchise to pivot its priorities in favour of a more comedic, at almost times bordering on very cartoony-like tone, due to the filmmakers and studio being worried about the public scrutiny and media scapegoating surrounding violent artistic content that was going on at the time. You know the shtick, it's surfaced every time there's a horrible act of violence with a decent amount of media coverage. It's forever the fault of whatever young people enjoy at the time. It's gotta be rock and roll, or comic books, or Dungeons and Dragons, or scary movies and video games. They're definitely the reason for all of society's ills. Obviously. It couldn't be anything else. I mean, it's definitely not that there's an issue with the lack of substantial and easily accessible mental health services or a predominant gun culture that can problematically clash with the motivational driving force of poisonous ideologies, including rampant misogyny, racism, or really any bigotry. It's definitely not venomous internet radicalization pushed by media corporations because hate clicks get lots of ad revenue. No! That's not what's at fault here. It's Doom 2. That's what did it. It's this little bastard. There he is, boys. Get him. Where's Superman? Go on, Superman. Get Get Doom 2. There you go. Well done. Put him in the Phantom Zone. Yeah, there we go. Congratulations, all. We fixed society. Thanks, Superman. So yeah, not wanting to end up in the prison of media scapegoating that sprouted up from the intensely think of the children mindset permeating the American psyche following a high-profile national tragedy, more so than any of the other Scream films, there's a lot more goofs and gaffs and campy characters and mystery solving this time round. And the killer spends a lot more time tripping over things and genuinely kinda bumbling a lot more. Which lowers the stakes and scares a lot because it's all a bit Scooby-Doo. But here's the thing, ladies, gentlemen and envies. I loves me a Scooby-Doo. A Scooby-Dooby-Doo. I'm holding this shot. We're going to sit in that for a moment. We're not moving on. Take it in. Enjoy it. Also, I actually think in one specific way this film is aged in a very peculiar and interesting manner. But to explain that point, we need to talk a little bit more about the plot, so let's jump right into it. The film opens, as Scream films tend to do, with a big establishing scare and murder that's only really tangentially related to the main story. Set years after the events of Scream 2, Cotton Weary, the exonerated and fame-hungry man Sidney once falsely accused of murder and saw sent to prison, has finally got his time in the spotlight, using his story of newly realised innocence to fame hop into hosting a trashy but extremely highly viewed Jerry Springer-esque talk show called 100% Cotton. Love that, brilliant. Perfect evolution of that character that is exactly where I expect him to be, and it's wrapped in a brilliant pun. High fives for everyone who thought of that one. While driving home, Cotton is contacted by a female fan who seemingly has the wrong number, and they flirt a little. However, once she has his attention, she reveals herself to be the newest Ghostface killer, using an admittedly crazy perfect voice modulator. Yeah, this comes up a lot in this film. Like, I know the voice modulation thing was used in past movies, but I could buy that because it always just made the killer sound like one specific voice. But apparently this film's Ghostface has upgraded the technology that we're only just figuring out now, is not only can it flawlessly transform their voice into that of a young woman, but also multiple other characters perfectly. Like on several occasions, Ghostface calls people pretending to be other members of the cast, and the voice changer is so perfect that they buy it. That's a bit of a plot convenience stretch. I don't know of many voice modulation systems that come with the non-famous and very specific people you interact with as perfect pre-installed presets. Little bit Scooby-Doo, but if you go with it and just buy into that concept, it's not like narrative breaking or anything, it's just a bit of an eye roll. Anyway, Ghostface antagonizes Cotton and threatens to kill his girlfriend Christine if he doesn't give up the whereabouts of Sidney Prescott. He lets Cotton know he's in his home and watching his girlfriend, and after a big actiony race back and some mind games, the killer strikes. Despite all the Scooby-Doo stumbling around, this surprisingly still creates an effective and tense opener, thanks to the once again brilliant direction of Wes Craven. We end this sequence with the first two murders of a couple that every Scream so far has kicked off with, and then crash cut to a title card and shift focus to our main cast. Firstly, we meet new kid on the block, Detective Mark Kincaid, who's a great new addition. He's a solid suspect for the crimes and a pretty likeable and well-rounded character, although he does have the single worst line in the entire franchise.
Hey, Detective. What's your favorite scary movie?
My life.
I promise he's not always like this. He's the detective in charge of cracking the case behind the murders of Cotton and Christine. Not really knowing where to start, he contacts Courtney Cox's returning Gale Weathers, the opportunistic reporter who wrote the sensationalist book on her involvement in the original Ghostface killings. Sensing a scoop and maybe even wanting to help out, she travels to Hollywood where the murders took place, and her investigations take her to the set of Stab 3, where Cotton was set to make a cameo appearance. Stab 3, of course, being the newest entry into the lucrative slasher franchise that spawned from the back of her book. While on set, she bumps into old flame and returning cast character Deputy Dewey, who is advising on the film as a consultant and now shares a somewhat ambiguously close relationship with the actress playing Gale Weathers. You might notice at this point that despite this franchise being predominantly Sidney's story, that Gale and Dewey kind of do the heavy lifting for the first act, only occasionally cutting to Sidney miles away to establish her newly secluded living situation and new job as a crisis counsellor. This is actually a design by necessity, as actress Neve Campbell was only available for a period of 20 days due to other commitments, and the script had to change and lower her screen time to accommodate this. Credit to Craven and Kruger for making this pretty seamless though. Sydney's self-isolation and role as a crisis counsellor after what she's went through feels pretty natural a plot point. Anyway, as the film develops, the cast of Stab 3 start to get murdered one by one, specifically in the same order of the script, suggesting the killer is someone with insider knowledge. And often, they are dispatched in a lot more bloodless manners than the past, like this gas explosion. As the body count continues to rise and the killer manages to find Sydney, our returning final girl gets the gang back together for some good old mystery solving. They even find a fun way to bring murdered fan favourite Randy back, as he gets a fun cameo in a newly surfaced pre-recorded tape he made before his death, where he waxes poetically once more about slasher tropes to help our heroes from beyond the grave. That's cute. I like that. With every death, the killer leaves a mysterious clue of a black and white picture of Maureen Prescott, Sydney's dead mother, though specifically images of her in her younger years. And our protagonists quickly realise that these pictures are of her right here in Hollywood. And this is where the film gets pretty interesting. Remember that this film came out in the year 2000 when I say this next bit. So Sydney finds out that her mother had a brief acting career under the wing of Stab franchise producer John Milton. They confront John about this knowledge of Maureen and why he didn't come forward with this information when the killer was leaving all these photos. John admits that he knew Maureen briefly, that she was an aspiring actress who he, like he does with most of his female talent, had arranged for to attend a party with various influential men. A system he claimed to be a staple in Hollywood that would see girls given ample opportunities so long as they were willing to make the right impression. He goes on to elaborate that things may have gotten out of hand with these men, but says that Maureen knew what she was getting in for, and if she couldn't handle that heat, to get out of Hollywood, because if you want to get ahead, you gotta play the game. He ends this disgusting monologue with the chilling line, "Nothing happened to her that she didn't invite in one way or another, no matter what she said afterwards." I don't think I need to spell out what's going on here. This film calls out Harvey Weinstein. Well, I will say not Harvey specifically, and not just one person in general, but this film directly draws attention to and spotlights the open secret of the casting couch culture of Hollywood, long before a general public ever had any knowledge about it. It is not relegated to this moment as well, it's a straight up thematic thread. Gale Weathers' Stab actress Jennifer makes a remark regarding a relationship with her producer. Angelina, the young, quiet and shy actress debuting as Sydney Prescott before her death, cries out after the film goes under that she can't believe she slept with that pig John Milton to get the role. And Carrie Fisher, in a very meta cameo where she plays a Carrie Fisher lookalike, remarks that she was also up for Princess Leia, but of the two almost twin-like performers, the one who got the part was the one willing to sleep with George Lucas. The revelations and multiple accusations against Weinstein wouldn't surface in the public eye for another 17 years, and seemingly no one really batted an eye at this subplot back in the year 2000s. Perhaps worryingly, this points to how accepted it was. Or maybe we were just naive and didn't fully comprehend the problem this was pulling from here as anything other than a fictional urban legend played for cheap horror. But watching it now, knowing all we know, this shit is like uncomfortable. And not uncomfortable in a bad way, like it should feel uncomfortable, but just like, how did this make it in here? It half feels like a warning we should have paid more attention to. Granted, it's a fairly clunky warning. It comes in the form of a subplot of a critically middling third entry into a slasher franchise, and Maureen Prescott and many other women are slut-shamed way too often in this series by other characters for it to firmly be on the right side of things. Though granted, this shaming is often from the mouths of villainous characters, and in this film at least, this ideology does seem to be depicted as poisonous. However, it's just a little messy in its delivery when you're exposing this culture in one scene and then having characters joke about it in passing in the next. And that's already pretty messy before we even get into the semantics of the film being made under the Dimension Films banner, which was a subsidiary of the Weinstein Brothers Miramax company at the time, so it was technically making money for arguably one of this culture's biggest problematic elements. Granted, Dimension Films was more the brainchild of brother Bob Weinstein, who wanted to focus on genre films, while Harvey was more hands-on with the Miramax label doing the more prestige flicks, but still, that connection is a little complicated. Not that I think they shouldn't have been making these statements under a Weinstein banner. If anything, if that's the platform you've got and you can get away with it, that's probably where you should be shouting about it the loudest. But it's also kind of depressing that Harvey was apparently so comfortable in his seat of abusive power that he didn't step in any way and ask these references to be removed, even though he had made input on Dimension Film Productions outside of this. Maybe he was too busy and didn't know, maybe he just didn't care. But either way, the fact that this was so open a secret in Hollywood even 17 years before the big New York Times expose that a screenwriter who barely even had any large experience in the industry could make it a plot point and comment on it is depressingly telling. I don't know how I feel about this theme's inclusion. I'm not opposed to people using the platforms given to them by bad, powerful people to call out those same bad, powerful people, even when it makes those bad people money. You have to use whatever platform you've got that has the biggest reach to the most eyes and ears sometimes. And coded language in Scream 3 was going to be seen by a lot of people, where say whichever person that had put this in, be it Craven, Kruger, or an artifact left over from Williamson's notes, had they put this in a more blunt and open manner on say a random blog post somewhere, it's likely no one would have read it, the powers that be would have seen it buried in the blink of an eye with threats of libel court cases, and they'd probably never have worked again. But still, it is a little unsettling that this is a subplot in a fun/a satire, isn't it? There's every possibility this wasn't even intended to spotlight anything and was just something sensationalist to throw in the plot. In the end, I guess I'm not saying it's bad, I'm not saying it's good, I'm just saying it's extremely noteworthy. Complicated as its inclusion may be, and as many reasons as we can speculate as to why it was included aside, the fact of the matter is, it's there, it's very central to the film's conceit, and it's kind of surprising and definitely worth discussing. The rest of the film, unfortunately, or I guess maybe fortunately, depending on how you want to look at it, isn't anywhere near as noteworthy. We get some more killer hijinks, and the final reveal falls completely flat for me. For the previous two Scream videos, I didn't reveal the final twist as I thought they were good enough that they should be seen by anyone who hadn't watched them firsthand, but in order to criticise this one, I kinda have to spell it out, so spoilers if you're bothered about that, but it's not a great twist anyway. The killer is revealed to be Stab 3's director Roman, who it turns out is the secret brother to Sidney, born from her mother's time in Hollywood, presumably from the traumatic events that caused her to leave and give him up for adoption. Mad at his mother's absence from his life, Roman takes revenge on her by, in a really crappy retcon, being the secret mastermind behind the first film's murders, and now he's jealous of Sidney's fame or something, so he plans to frame her for the murders. Not my bag. Secret familial relationships to me feels like the kind of thing this film should be satirizing, not playing straight. It feels like the kind of lazy horror twist that Once Upon a Time Scream would make fun of. And here, it's the big final reveal. It's just a bit of a misfire. Anyway, after that flat note, the heroes kill Roman, we wrap up the romance between Dewey and Gale by having Dewey propose, and the film ends with a little note where Sidney is shown to feel comfortable and safe in her own home. And we leave our beloved characters on a nice, happy ending. So yeah, all in all, not bad. A bit Scooby-Doo perhaps, but that's not the worst thing. Craven's direction still gives us a decent degree of scary, even when his hands are tied to a less bloody and more comedic tone, and now our characters get a deserving send-off on what was supposed to be the final film. Not the best Scream, as many will point out, but by no means as bad as its reputation sometimes suggests it to be. Its tone isn't so goofy as to be off-putting a la Freddy's Dead, and although its mystery is never quite as good and it's never quite as scary and never quite as sharp in its metatextual satire, it's still an enjoyable ride with lovable characters. Plus, no matter which way you slice it, whether you love it, hate it, or anything in between, there's no denying that the Weinstein-esque subplot and theme is really something. Whether it's a good something or not, I'm not certain. But it's worth the discussion it sparks, and I think regardless of whether it was meant as any kind of commentary, and even if it was well-intentioned or simply sensationalist, it does shine a light on an uncomfortable truth behind the scenes of a powerful industry. And as messy and Scooby-Dooey as the film may be, that's worth reassessing. Anyway, sorry to go into some bleak territory on this one, but I don't think I'd have been doing my job right if I didn't bring that stuff up. You'll be happy to know though that when we take a look at the return of the franchise with Scream 4 tomorrow, things are a little less heavy and a lot more fun. So please, if you're enjoying this series, do remember to subscribe to my OnlyDans at the red button and hit that bell below so you don't miss the notification for that. Also, feel free to give me some of that sweet algorithm engagement with a like and a comment. And of course, if you're really enjoying the show and would like to support the channel in a big way, then you can do so by becoming a patron at the Patreon link in the description and get yourself some cool exclusives for the trouble. No pressure on that one though. And with all that out of the way, it is once again time for me to sign off. So as always, I've been Dan Drambles. You're watching Wholesome Halloween 2 Slasher Season, and I will see you again tomorrow.